Another Russian war factory has been hit by a Ukrainian strike, and this one is one of the most important ones. This is actually a huge blow to Russia. We're going to talk about what happened and stick with me to the very end of this video, when we will see how Putin's regime is literally collapsing right now. You are not going to want to miss this. I'm a U.S. Army combat veteran. It's October 26, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. The only changes are actually outside of Bakhmut. So you can see here, this is north of Klishivka. And as you can see, there's been some back and forth here over the last several days. And you can see that it looks like Russia may have conducted a small counterattack and pushed Ukrainian forces back slightly. But I think this is probably within the margin of error of the maps that we've seen previously. There's really been no change of any real consequence. When we look over at the combat map, you can see Russia continuing to push in Volgograd with 34 combat engagements, but also continuing to push in the northern part of Donetsk region, just shy of Bakhmut. And then, of course, in Zaporizhzhia, in Kherson, relatively light day all things considered. Now, the news is actually not about the combat, though. The news today is from the Ministry of Defense of the United Kingdom, which says that they have assessed that a fire at the 61st repair plant in the Kursk Oblast, which is a region in Russia, is likely the result of a successful Ukrainian strike. Now, this repair plant is one of only 2 known plants that can repair and maintain the Iskander missile complexes, which are used for the Iskander missiles that Russia has fired many of into Ukraine. In fact, I was just talking about these yesterday, right? How Russia had fired off a volley of these missiles, and that these are extremely accurate, some of the most accurate missiles in the Russian arsenal. Well, now we know that at least one of the facilities that can repair these has been taken offline. And again, out of the 2 known facilities, this is one of them. This is a huge blow to Russian military industry. Is this the single biggest blow? No. Is this a significant blow? Yes. Why is it a significant blow? Because it shows that Ukraine is able to strike deep inside Russia at military-industrial capacity. Remember, Russia has moved much of its military-industrial capacity east, far away from the border with Ukraine. And they've done so because they've feared exactly this. They knew that Ukraine would eventually be able to strike at these facilities if they got close enough to them. And so now they're having to move these facilities even farther east. In fact, they've started moving them into makeshift locations, like not even hangars, just out in the open, which makes them even easier targets. And this, of course, slows down production and decreases the overall quality of the production. So we're going to see this is really starting to have an effect on the Russian war machine. In fact, we've talked about how there's been sort of this steady decline in the rate of production of Russian artillery shells, right? That initially they were producing something like 20,000 shells per day. Then they dropped down to 40,000 shells a day. And now it seems like they're producing just over 30,000 shells a day. And you can see how that's a pretty steep drop-off. And this is probably due to the effects of Ukraine being able to strike inside of Russia. And this is really going to become problematic for Russia, because they are just simply not going to have the volume of supplies necessary to continue this fight. Now you might say, well, if they can't produce enough shells, they'll just use the shells that they have left. Well, there's a problem with that too, because according to our friend Two Colonel cites unnamed sources saying that there's actually been a proposal from the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces to limit base storage of artillery munitions. So basically, they are going to try to move these shells closer to the front lines in order to make them more available to units that need them. But this is going to decrease the amount of time that it takes for those units to run out of ammunition. So ultimately, it's going to force them to retreat or to surrender once they run out of ammunition. But of course, this isn't just a blow to Russia's ability to wage war. This is also a blow to Putin personally. Putin is fighting this war on multiple levels, right? Not just on the level of his military apparatus, but on the level of his domestic politics as well. He needs this war to go well in order to maintain his power at home. So blows like this to the Russian war machine, they hurt him on a personal level. In fact, let's take a look at the state of Putin's power right now, which is deteriorating rapidly. So first off, the ruble has fallen to a record low. It's dropped below 100 rubles to $1, which means that it's now weaker than the Ukrainian currency. This is embarrassing for Putin. Putin likes to present himself as strong, not weak. And he needs the ruble to be strong because that's a signifier of a strong country. So this is a blow to his domestic legitimacy. Not only that, but there's growing rumblings of discontent among the Russian elites. According to Meduza, which is a great Russian-language media outlet based out of Latvia, there are members of the Russian parliament who are complaining that Putin is spending too much money on the war in Ukraine and not enough on the war on the border with Kazakhstan. Now, this is interesting to me because, remember, Russia has a very complicated relationship with Kazakhstan. On the one hand, Kazakhstan is a resource-rich nation, especially oil and gas, and Putin wants to bring Kazakhstan into the Russia-Belarus Union, and he's done a lot of work to bring that about. In fact, there are reports that Tokayev, who is the president of Kazakhstan, was groomed to succeed Putin as the leader of Russia. But Tokayev has since seemed to grow closer to China. And so Putin is concerned that if he doesn't spend enough money on Kazakhstan, that Tokayev may turn completely to China, and that Russia could lose influence in this key partner state. So this is a big deal. And the fact that Putin is getting pushback from members of his own parliament, this is telling. It shows that even those closest to Putin, his own allies, are starting to question whether or not he can win this war. And they're starting to press him to find a way out. And finally, you can see here, this is a headline that says, Putin's regime is collapsing from within. And this is basically a collection of stories that show that even family members of pro-war Russians are now starting to turn against the war, seeing that their children are dying in droves. And for what? For essentially no gain. This is a sign that the political dynamic in Russia is shifting, that Putin's propaganda simply is no longer working. And as he continues to escalate, as he continues to throw more and more troops into this meat grinder, he's going to have more and more pushback both at home and abroad. And that's really the key to winning this war, right? It's not just about what Ukraine is doing on the battlefield. It's also about the international political situation. And Ukraine is doing a great job of weakening Russia on that front as well. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Thank you so much. Please leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you guys think. What do you think is the best case scenario for Ukraine at this point? Obviously, we'd love to see them push into Transnistria, but that could lead to a broader war with Romania potentially, right? So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks again. See you in the next one.